Hey guys, it's Monica at Academic Phoenix Plus, and we are going to continue on with the match to life. So in the last tutorial, we went over setting up our camera and placing our object in the scene. In this tutorial, we're going to do a little bit of lighting. So when we're going to be lighting, we really need to figure out which direction the light is heading towards. So when I take a look at, let me hide these. Take a look at this. I notice that the light's coming from back here, and this is sunlight. So I took it at 9 a.m. in the morning. So yeah, so the shadows are long and they're a little bit soft and a little bit blue with some yellow light. So that's going to be really, really nice. I'm already have lights for my model, so I'm probably just going to delete one and keep the other one. Directional lights are really great for light sources like the sun and the moon and things that need shadows that are parallel. So let's go ahead and bring this back. And I'm going to grab this and just kind of tip it towards this direction. And I'm going to trigger Arnold. Now that well, first of all, it's rendering in the wrong camera. So over here, let's go to render cam. And let me close this, press play. There we go. So now it's lighting, and you can see that the shadow is coming along. Now, I really need to see what the shadows look like of the original image. So I am going to open it. I'm going to go to File, Open Image. I'm going to go to my source images. Find camera 1. Shift things around without triggering it. And notice that it's kind of disappeared. If I click the 1-to-1, it's going to be okay. Wow, that's over. The gamma's kind of crazy. But you'll notice that every single time I try to see it, I have to click on the 1-to-1, which is a little problematic, especially if I'm trying to compare shadows. So I need to have something that is similar to my render settings. So remember in the last tutorial, we actually changed the render settings to be 1024. So I want to do the same thing. So I'm going to go into Photoshop and just change it really fast to 1024 as well. So just give this a second. So here's my image. I'm going to go to image size 1024. I'm going to save as, it's going to be version 2. Let's save it as a PNG just so I can keep some of the high quality information. Go back to Maya and do the same thing. I'm going to go to File, Open Image, and grab this one. There we go. So I'm going to right click on this and say Delete Image. And I'm not really sure why it's so bright. So you can see that it's a little bit blown out. So if we go to Windows Display and trigger it, it's going to show this. And one of the things you'll notice is that the view transform is in gamma. So let's go to raw, and that's actually our photo. So that makes things a little bit easier. All right, so now that we have that, I'm going to turn that off. And let's take a look at our render. So right off the bat, we can see that it's extremely dark. So we can go ahead and open up the attributes of our light, and we can increase the intensity. Press play here. Let's scoot this over a little bit. And let's open up Arnold. And we can also start increasing the exposure. All right, we can also take a snapshot, and then we can compare our snapshots. So notice where this is going to be versus here, right? So we really need to make sure that our shadow information is accurate to this, and then that way things will fall into place. Now, theoretically, if my camera angle is correct, I should be able to get this very, very close. All right, so sorry I'm going back and forth. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Usually I mark, what I do is actually take a sticky note and or a post-it note, and I place it on the original image here. Like I'll put a sticky note here and a sticky note here and a sticky note here, and then I'll move my camera around until it fits. So I'm going to do that right now. You can't see it. I'll take a picture of it and show it to you guys. But that's what I'm going to do. So give me a second while I set that up. Okay, so while I pause that, I set up my sticky notes, and you can't see it, but here's a picture of it, and you'll notice that I literally put post-it notes there on my screen. It's not going to damage my screen. It's going to be fine, and that way I can use this as reference to where my shadows are going to be. So going back to here, I'm going to grab my directional light, wherever it is. Oh, I should have moved my computer. Nuts. I think nuts. Shouldn't have done that. Don't move it. Here we go. Okay, with this directional light, which you guys can't see, I'm going to start rotating it so that when it renders, I'm going to try to get it as close as I can. So turn off this snapshot here. And I'm going to go click on this, and I'm going to middle mouse and drag. Usually I have two screens with me, so this is going to be interesting. So I'm going to do my best. Okay, I'm getting closer. It's not too bad. Maybe if I rotate this, let's see what happens if I rotate this. So again, I'm just middle mousing and dragging. So it's a little much. It's not too bad. It's getting pretty close. All right, let's see what that looks like. Take a snapshot. Snapshot, thank you. Take this, delete it. That's the old one. This is the new one, and I can go around like this. So not too bad. There is a little bit of, let's see, what can I do here? Can definitely push it a little bit more. I'm looking at my car. Maybe it needs to be leaning a little bit more up so it's more accurate. So let me grab this. I'm gonna maybe rotate this a little bit, bring this back up. Maybe while this is down, I can grab this and move it. It's not going to affect anything. I just want to be able to look at it. All right, let's see what that looks like. So now I've rotated a couple of things. Now I have a little bit more control, so I'm going to go ahead and move this around a little bit and try to get my lighting to look a little bit more accurate. It's actually pretty, I think that's going to be pretty close. We'll see. All right, let's open up the attributes and take a look at shadow information. So when we look at the snapshot, you'll see how nice and soft that is. We're going to do the same here. We're going to increase our angle. Oops, let's get out of this. And this might increase our shadows a little bit. And then we're going to increase our samples. Probably don't want to go any further than a 4. But this is going to help with our shadows. I'm still not too convinced with light, so I might bring it down a little bit and then maybe soften the shadows a little bit further just to try to really get that. All right, and let's see. So don't forget that there's also a lot of bumps because of the rocks. All right, once I have that, we're gonna start playing around with color. So I'm getting that nice, actually that shadow should go a little further in, so I'm gonna do that. All right. Next is the color. So let's add a little bit of color. You can use color temperature, but I'm going to use my own eyes to kind of get the nice lighting, kind of like yellowish lighting. Make sure it's nice and bright. And I'm starting to see some changes, but let's go ahead and increase our angle to 4. And I want to increase my exposure a little bit. Whoops, too much. Something like that. Okay, so there's things I need to still tweak, but right now the shader is actually something that I want to fix. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. AI standard, I want to increase the roughness a little bit. Make sure that you grab the body, the car body, and also increase the roughness. Right, so, oops, that's probably a little too rough. So let me go ahead and go back a little bit. Something like that. And maybe reduced in, well, let's see what we can do with this guy. Get some lines in there. Calm the color a little bit so it's not so shiny. All right, so now that we've done this part, let's add our dome so we can get some reflections. We are going to be using the Arnold Lights Sky Dome. Then we're going to go to our color. We're going to go to our file, go to a little folder, and let's look for the dome. Here's our sphere. I'm going to open it up. And if I go to a perspective render, you're going to see that it's pretty amazing. If you look around, there is a little bit of a seam here, but it captures the reflections pretty well. There is a little bit of information here that's getting kind of cut off, but otherwise it's looking pretty good. And what I really want is the reflection facing the camera. So the trick to this, to getting accurate reflections, is actually staring at the camera. So let's take a look at where the camera is at. This is what I do. And I focus in and I just kind of pretend I'm looking at it like this. Like this is where the camera, if I was a camera person holding the camera, this is how I'd be looking at the camera. Then I'm going to scroll back. I take this and I'm going to rotate it. Now, you see that camera? That's where you want to try to place your camera as well. That's where the goal is here. So I'm going to maybe rotate it up a little bit. And I just want to make sure that this is where the camera is at. So that's where I took a picture of all these objects, and this is where I'm at. So that's where I want to get my reflections. Now, the cool thing is that this is also going to emit light. So let's see what we have so far. Let's go back to our render camera. Press play. And right away, we're getting some interesting looking stuff. First of all, we're seeing our background through our image plane, which we don't want that. But notice how nice the lighting is already. It's getting nice accurate shadows. It's kind of like a nice blue. It's catching some of the reflection. Notice over here. It's looking kind of nice, but we really don't want to see the background. So over here in your sky dome, there is a camera. You can just turn that off to 0. So now we don't see that sky dome anymore. We do see our reference image, but we don't see the sky dome. It still has, transmission and diffuse. It's still going to affect all the reflections, just that we don't need to see it in the background. So let's take a look at our reference here. And then let's go back to, we can just kind of flip back and forth. And it's actually not too bad. There's things that I still need to work on, but I'm getting some nice color. I like the shadow information for sure. This is nice. We're getting some nice occlusion. We're still going to create our own occlusion, but there's things that I need to change, like a little bit of the geometry. So you're going to start noticing the details. Notice that there's a little bit of red here, and I'm not getting any of that here. So I want to add a little bit of that information in. Now, just to double check, I am going to select this dome. And I usually go over here and change. It does come with an sRGB. Let's see what happens when you change this into raw. So I'm going to press stop, display. Actually, let me just refresh Arnold just because. And I'm not seeing too much of a difference, but raw is usually a better color space to use than the sRGB. All right, so now that we have that, we do want to change our resolution. So let's take a look at our dome here and see what resolution it is. And by the way, when you guys take a picture of your dome, make sure that it's a square, 720 by 720. Okay, that's really important. So I'm going to leave the resolution at 1000. 720 is a little low, and I don't want it to affect my lighting, so I'm leaving the resolution as it is. But this is going to give me some nice reflections. All right, let's focus on that red. So I'm going to create a light. I'm going to probably use a spotlight. I'm going to look through selected. Okay, let me double check. Okay, good. And I'm going to be aiming at it. So, and I think this is slowing down, so I'm going to stop it. Okay, so I know that my camera is here, and I just kind of want to light it towards my vehicle like so. This is slightly red, so I'm going to kind of make it a little bit red. I could see what type of effect it has, but I'm just going to soften this up a little bit, 10.3. And let's see what Arnold is going to give me. So not very much. Let's increase our intensity. I'm not seeing much in effect, so I'm going to stop this. I'm going to hide my lights, except for the spotlight. So Control H, and I'm going to press play and see what type of effect. So I'm not getting much of an effect, even though it's an intensity of 10. So let's go to Arnold, and let's increase our exposure until we see something. There we go. We're starting to see an effect. Okay, good. At least we're seeing something. All right, let's go ahead and bring everything back up. Shift H. Way too bright, but at least I now see the spotlight. Okay, using with this information, I can reduce the exposure. What I'm trying to do is get the nice red color that this emblems has, and now it's rendering everything. So let me just focus on here. Okay, so we're getting the color. It's still a little bright, but I think all my values need to be cranked up because it's not enough. So let's go to our sky and let's increase our intensity here. And let me hide all my lights. Interesting. My sky dome's not really emitting anything. Let's go ahead and crank up the values and the exposure. All right, refresh Maya. Now, sorry, I was just troubleshooting. Go back to raw. Close this, open it up again. Yep, oops. I was trying to see that color and it was just nothing was showing up. So let me go ahead and bring this back up. Okay, my intensity is intense. Haha. Okay. It's looking pretty good. I think I need to just crank it up a little bit more. Right, I wanted to make sure it looks like daylight. Maybe 2.5 is better. Getting some nice light, bringing this back, directional. This is my sun. So maybe reduce the intensity, exposure intensity. But at least now it's starting to look like daylight, right? So this is what it looks before, this is what it looks like after. So the colors are starting to come out a little bit more. It's still maybe a little too bright, but at least now it looks better than what it did. Okay, so back to my skylight. Bring this down to 2. Go bring this back in. My spotlight to give me a little bit more red in my scene. Let that render for a second, and then I could compare. So I'm getting closer. So I still feel it's a little bright, but at least I'm getting the values. All right, let me go back to my red. Maybe the intensity is pretty good. Let's go ahead and reduce a little bit more the values. I don't want to get too dark, but I definitely want to see this. So actually, I think my directional light needs a little bit more intensity this time. There we go. I want that highlight to show up. So now that I'm getting closer and closer, the next thing I want to do is try to push this a little bit further when it comes to the texture itself. You know, I'm getting the nice shadows, I'm getting a lot of really good information, but the texture can help me as well. So I'm going to go back into my perspective angle. Oops, I'm going to grab my car body. And one of the things that I did was I realized that I'm having some issues with the color. It's too gray. It's gray. So I'm going to grab the car color too, which I made this a little bit more blue. And now when I go back into my render camera, oops, it's really blown out now, but at least now it's starting to look a little bit more blue. So now I got to figure out which one do I need to reduce. Do I want to reduce the dome light? Whoops. And potentially my directional. Maybe I need to reduce well, that's not too bad actually. Let's look back and forth, and we are getting a lot closer now. Notice the colors are a lot better. There's things I need to fix when it comes to my geometry. I definitely recommend that you guys take the time to fix that. I'm going to have to move forward, but at this time we have some really good information. We have a little bit of we have the shadow information, we have reflections, we have all sorts of really great stuff going on here that I think we're ready to move on. So the last step before we start doing render layers is we're going to grab the toy car and we're going to place it where the CG twin is. So I'm going to rotate this, lift it up, make sure it's not too crazy in the geometry. I want a little bit, not too much, like something like that. And render this out. And this is what it looks like. Now remember, we have a picture of the actual on the other side here. So it's not exactly in the same location, but there are things that need to be fixed, like the specularity and so on and so forth, which I think I actually roughed up so it won't see it, and a couple of other things. But in general, let me see if I can fix that really quickly. That's Chrome. There it is. Let's go ahead and try to bring this back up a little bit. So now we're getting the spec, maybe my geometry. I can go to my bump map and it's 0.2. Maybe I can increase it a little bit more to 0.3. So there's a lot of things you can tweak to try to get that texture to look much closer to the photo. All right, guys, so that is a tutorial on how to light your scene. Showed you a bunch of tricks on how to get accurate shadows, lighting, take a look at your soft lighting, your specularity. There's a lot of information going on into your photos, so try to get it as accurate as possible. The next step is going to be to create all the AOVs and how to export all the render layers so that we can composite them in After Effects. So I hope that was helpful. I know that was a lot of really good information. Let me know if you have any questions below. It does take some practice and tweaking. There's a lot of things that I definitely can do to improve, but I need to move forward, and hopefully it's enough to get you guys into a good place. So thanks everybody. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next tutorial.